Imagine you are a Democratic strategist in Maine, right? And you have just found your absolute unicorn candidate.
Oh, the dream scenario.
Exactly. A tattooed, working-class oyster farmer with 4 combat tours who goes instantly viral, raises $1 million in a week, and looks completely unstoppable.
Right up until the moment someone looks a little too closely at a symbol inked on his chest.
Yeah, and then digs up his secret Reddit history.
It's the ultimate story of political whiplash.
It really is.
I mean, the rise breaks all the traditional rules of modern campaigns, and the crash exposes some incredibly dark realities about running for office in the digital age.
So let's lay out the timeline here, because the speed of this is just staggering. We're talking about Graham Platner.
Right.
He is a 41-year-old former Marine. He did 4 combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He comes home, works as a small-town harbor master, and then he takes over the Waukig Neck Oyster Company in Maine.
A very blue-collar, rugged background.
Totally. And out of nowhere, he announces a run for the U.S. Senate in 2026 to challenge the Republican incumbent, Susan Collins.
And he just explodes.
Right. He drops this incredibly raw campaign video that gets 2.5 million views in 24 hours.
Which is massive for a state-level race.
Huge. He raises $1 million in just 9 days. But then, just as quickly, journalists unearth some highly controversial Reddit posts under a secret username.
Yeah, and then the photos surface.
Right, the photos of his chest tattoo. It's a design that looks identical to the Totenkopf, which is a symbol used by the Nazi SS.
And that's when everything falls apart.
Exactly. The staff starts resigning, and the entire political machine just goes into overdrive.
He essentially built an empire in a week, and now we are watching it catch fire in real time.
So welcome to our deep dive. You are joining us today to unpack this absolute meteor of a campaign. Our mission is to figure out the mechanics behind Graham Platner's massive rise and scandalous stumble.
We have a huge stack of sources on the table today.
We do, yeah. News articles, opinion pieces, historical context, official campaign statements. We are pulling it all together to understand what this race actually tells us about modern politics.
Because it tells us a lot.
It really does. But before we look at the crash, we kind of have to understand the launch, right? Like, who is Graham Platner and how did he build this massive wave to begin with?
Well, his background is fundamentally the perfect recipe for a populist candidate. I mean, he enlisted in the Marine Corps in 2003, right out of high school.
Right.
He spends the next 8 years serving in both the Marines and the Maryland National Guard, surviving heavy combat in places like Ramadi and Fallujah.
And looking at our sources, that military experience completely shaped his worldview, right?
Yeah.
Not in the way you might expect from a typical politician.
No, not at all. He didn't come back waving a flag and running for office immediately. He actually went to work as a State Department security contractor in Afghanistan, protecting the U.S. ambassador.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but he became deeply disillusioned. He saw the inner workings of the military-industrial complex and started openly criticizing what he called the fraudulent funneling of taxpayer money to private defense companies.
So he just quit.
He quit. He came back to Maine around 2018, sought treatment for severe PTSD, and completely dropped off the corporate and political radar.
All right. And that's when he started farming oysters, taking over the Waukig Neck Oyster Company by 2020.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the core of his appeal, really. He lives this very rugged, tactile, working-class life on the water. He openly admits the oyster business barely makes ends meet, and he survives largely on his 100% disabled veteran benefits.
It's a very authentic struggle.
It is. And that sets up his campaign launch in August 2025. It wasn't some sanitized speech behind a podium. He drops this gritty video directly attacking the oligarchy and billionaires. He points at the camera and says he isn't afraid to name the enemy.
And you know, the mechanism behind that launch is fascinating.
How so?
Well, in traditional politics, you spend months begging wealthy donors for seed money to hire consultants who then craft a very, safe message.
Right, the usual playbook.
Right. But Platner did the exact opposite. He relied on raw anger and authenticity.
He basically pulled an indie band stadium takeover.
That's a great way to put it, actually.
Yeah, I mean, he bypassed the DNC record executives entirely, put his track on YouTube, and just let the algorithm do the heavy lifting. And the stats are wild.
Staggering.
Raising $1 million in 9 days, primarily through small dollar donations. That means thousands of regular people felt so energized that they immediately pull out their credit cards.
Yeah, and he secured an army of over 6,000 volunteers almost overnight.
Which is just insane.
It is. His momentum was so aggressive that it completely cleared the primary field. I mean, the sitting governor of Maine, Janet Mills, she dropped out of the race because she simply couldn't compete with that level of viral enthusiasm.
No.
Platner rolled out a fiercely anti-establishment platform. Medicare for all, higher taxes on the ultra-wealthy, ending foreign wars.
And it earned him massive endorsements, right? Heavyweights like Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Exactly.
But, if you are a voter watching this, you have to ask yourself, do people really care about his specific policy stances on tax rates? Or is it that working class, calloused hands persona acting as like a Trojan horse for the politics?
Oh, it is absolutely the persona delivering the policy.
Yeah.
For sure. Plenty of progressive candidates run on Medicare for All and fail to get any traction. But when a combat veteran who works on an oyster boat says the system is rigged, it bypasses the voters' natural skepticism.
Right, they see a real person.
They look at him and see someone who actually understands their daily struggles. That unfiltered outsider energy is the ultimate political currency right now.
But here's the catch. That same unfiltered middle finger to the establishment energy that built his campaign is exactly what derailed it. Because being totally unfiltered in your 20s and 30s leaves a massive digital footprint. And reporters found an absolute goldmine.
The digital ghosts of Graham Platner.
Exactly. The media unearthed a Reddit account under the username phustle.
Phustle.
Yeah, phustle. And the post history reads like opposition research fiction. I mean, he called himself a communist. He advocated for an armed working class. He made deeply insensitive comments suggesting that women who are concerned about rape need to take responsibility for their drinking.
Just incredibly toxic stuff.
Right. But while all of that was damaging, the controversy that actually broke the campaign open centered around another veteran named Teddy Daniels.
And this is where the story gets really visceral.
It does. We have to look at the Teddy Daniels video to understand why the backlash was so severe. So back in 2012, Daniels was an army soldier in Afghanistan. His unit gets ambushed and pinned down by Taliban fighters. And Daniels makes a conscious decision to step out into the open, completely exposing himself just to draw enemy fire away from his squad. He's wearing a helmet camera so you can watch the footage.
It's intense.
It's terrifying. You see rocks exploding around him. You hear the gunfire. He gets shot 4 times. Bullets literally bounce off his helmet.
Unbelievable.
He survives, saves his squad, and earns a Purple Heart.
It is the defining definition of combat heroism.
Fast forward to 2019. That helmet cam footage is viral on Reddit. Graham Platner watches this video of a fellow American soldier getting shot to pieces to save his men. And from the safety of his keyboard, Platner posts a comment calling Daniels a dumb mother effer who, quote, didn't deserve to live.
Just brutal.
He mocks Daniels for terrible tactical decisions and says he only survived because the Taliban were bad shots. What is the mechanism behind a veteran attacking a wounded Purple Heart recipient like that?
Well, when confronted, Platner tried to explain his psychological state at the time. He didn't deny writing it.
He owned up to it.
Yes, but he blamed the posts on his severe struggles with PTSD, his profound anger and disillusionment after leaving the military, and just a culture of aggressively trolling on the internet.
Okay.
He framed it as dark humor from a very dark time in his life, arguing it doesn't reflect the man running for Senate today.
But Teddy Daniels didn't accept that at all, did he?
Not even slightly. Daniels went extremely public, stating that Platner using PTSD as a shield is a massive insult to every service member who actually suffers from trauma.
Right.
Daniels argued that true leaders take accountability, and he bluntly labeled Platner an entitled brat who refuses to own his cruelty.
So put yourself in the shoes of a Maine voter for a second. This brings up a massive question about digital permanence.
It really does.
Is it actually fair to judge a 41-year-old's current fitness to write legislation based on anonymous, highly toxic internet trolling from 7 years ago?
Yeah.
Especially when the candidate explicitly cites severe trauma at the time.
And that is the dividing line for the electorate right there. I mean, one camp argues that the internet is a toxic place that encourages performative cruelty, and we shouldn't destroy a career over message board venting from someone struggling with mental health.
Which makes sense.
But the counter-argument is that Platner wasn't an edgy teenager finding himself. He was a grown man in his mid-30s actively mocking a wounded soldier.
Yeah, that's a tough look.
Critics argue that if your default reaction to trauma is extreme public cruelty, Voters have every right to question your judgment and character.
Absolutely. And it's one thing to have a terrible internet history. We have seen politicians survive bad tweets or old blog posts. But the scandal shifts into a totally different beast when it bleeds from digital forums into physical reality.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the tattoo.
The totem cuff.
Right. Platner has a large tattoo on his chest featuring a skull superimposed over crossbones. It is not just a generic pirate skull. It very closely matches the Totenkopf, which is a specific historical insignia utilized by the Nazi SS paramilitary group during World War II.
Yeah.
When reporters cornered him on this, what was his defense?
Ignorance. Pure ignorance. Platner claims he got the tattoo back in 2007 while deployed overseas with the Marines.
Okay.
His story is that he was on leave in Croatia, got extremely inebriated with his unit, and they all just picked the most terrifying designs they could find off the wall of a local tattoo parlor.
So he says he didn't know.
He insists he had zero knowledge of its Nazi associations until political operatives pointed it out recently, and he immediately had it covered up with a new design.
But our sources cast serious doubt on that timeline.
They do, yeah.
Because an anonymous former acquaintance went to the press and directly contradicted the ignorance defense. This source claims Platner knew exactly what the history was and actively referred to the ink as, quote, my Totenkopf.
And that allegation changes the entire center of gravity for the campaign.
Completely.
A drunken mistake by a 24-year-old Marine in Croatia is a narrative some voters might forgive. But if he knew the symbol's meaning and probably wore it anyway, that implies an ideological sympathy that is completely toxic.
And you can see the panic internally, because the staff exodus in October 2025 was immediate and brutal.
Oh, it was a stampede.
His campaign manager, Kevin Brown, resigns. His finance director, Ronald Holmes, resigns. But the resignation that truly exposes the internal chaos comes from his political director, Genevieve McDonald.
Her exit is the smoking gun of this entire scandal.
Because of the money, right. The sources note that when she resigned, the campaign offered her a $15,000 severance package. But it came attached to a non-disclosure agreement.
Right, an NDA.
And McDonald explicitly rejected the $15,000 because she refused to be silenced by that NDA. We need to explain the mechanism here, because $15,000 for a state-level political staffer is a lot of money to leave on the table.
It is massive. I mean, in campaign crisis management, NDAs act as a tourniquet.
Okay, how so?
When a scandal breaks, you pay departing staff severance to legally bind them from speaking to the press, which buys the candidate time to control the narrative.
Got it.
By rejecting the money and the NDA, McDonald essentially cut the tourniquet. She told the public and the press that whatever was happening behind closed doors was so toxic that she would rather take a massive financial hit than be legally associated with covering it up.
So this isn't just a ship taking on water. This is the crew actively drilling holes in the lifeboat because they want the voters to see it sink.
Wow. Yes. Exactly.
When the inner circle, the people who see the internal polling and know the candidate best, when they run for the exits and refuse hush money, it signals a complete collapse of trust.
Right.
It validates the voters' worst fears because the narrative shifts from the media is out to get him to his own loyalists can't even stomach him.
Exactly. The staff's job is to vet and protect the candidate. When they flee, they are flashing a giant warning sign to the electorate.
So, with the staff gone, the Reddit posts exposed, and the Nazi-link tattoo dominating the headlines, you would assume the mainstream political machinery would pull the plug.
You'd think so.
But they haven't. The story shifts to the broader political fallout and the extreme polarization happening across the country. Let's look at how the two parties are weaponizing this crisis.
The reactions are a perfect mirror of modern political dysfunction.
Starting with the Republicans. GOP State Senator Trey Stewart hit the radio circuit hard, accusing Democrats of selling their soul to defeat Susan Collins.
Right.
Stewart's argument is that Platner represents the exact extremes that the left usually crucifies the right for. He is pointing out the glaring hypocrisy of a party that claims to champion women and minorities, backing a candidate with misogynistic posts and a Nazi-adjacent chest tattoo.
And the GOP strategy here is really smart. They aren't just attacking Platner, they are attacking the moral foundation of the Democratic Party, saying you will compromise all your stated values the second it benefits you politically.
But the shocking part is how the Democrats are responding.
Oh, it's wild.
Despite the resignations and the backlash, party leadership has largely dug in their heels. The DNC chair, Ken Martin, released a statement calling the Reddit posts Hurtful, but explicitly said they were not disqualifying. And the progressive wing is holding strong. Senator Bernie Sanders continues to support him, and Senator Elizabeth Warren actually went on record calling Platner my kind of man.
And Platner is feeding them a very specific strategic threat to keep them in line, too.
That's the threat.
He is aggressively warning Democratic leadership that if they cancel him over edgy internet history, they're going to permanently alienate a massive demographic of young working-class men.
Interesting.
He's basically telling the DNC, if you scrutinize the anonymous forum posts of every young male voter, you will lose that entire voting bloc forever.
I have to push back on this, though. Why on earth is the mainstream Democratic establishment continuing to back a candidate with undeniable baggage? Like, do they actually believe his defenses about internet culture and PTSD, or is this purely political math?
Honestly, it is almost entirely the math, and it's driven by a concept called negative partisanship.
Break that down for us. How does negative partisanship explain the DNC ignoring a Totenkopf tattoo?
Well, negative partisanship means that voters and party leaders are no longer motivated by how much they love their own candidate.
Okay.
They are motivated by how absolutely terrified they are of the opposing party holding power.
Oh, wow.
Right. Susan Collins is the last sitting federal Republican in New England. Taking her Senate seat is a massive mathematical prize for the Democrats in Washington.
Well, the numbers game.
Exactly. When they look at Platner, they see a guy who can raise $1 million in 9 days and turn out voters who normally stay home. In modern politics, momentum eclipses morality.
That's a dark way to look at it.
It is, but the establishment looks at the math and decides that swallowing his scandals is simply the required price of admission to flip the state. They hate the baggage, but they fear Susan Collins keeping her seat even more.
So what does this all mean for the future of our elections? The 2026 Maine Senate race is putting a massive structural question to the test, right? Can a populist anti-establishment wave carry a candidate across the finish line despite a barrage of severe personal controversies?
It is the ultimate stress test for the American electorate. We're watching a live collision between raw policy appeal and deeply flawed personal character.
And that brings this entire story right back to you, the listener. If you are filling out a ballot, how do you evaluate authenticity in modern leaders?
That's a tough call.
Do we demand sanitized perfection from our politicians, knowing that usually means electing polished, wealthy elites? Or do we accept messy, sometimes deeply offensive histories as the required price for electing regular, working-class citizens who actually understand the struggle?
It forces every voter to ask what they value more. A spotless digital record or a candidate who speaks directly to their anger, even if that candidate has serious, undeniable flaws.
Which leaves us with one final, provocative thought to mull over. We are entering an era where the generation that grew up entirely on the internet is beginning to run for high office.
Yeah, that's true.
Every edgy joke, every bad take, and every anonymous forum post from their teenage years and 20s is sitting on a server somewhere, waiting to be unearthed. Will this kind of digital baggage eventually become the norm for all politicians?
It might have to be.
Because if everyone has a searchable history of terrible internet takes, we're going to have to completely rewrite the rules of what is considered disqualifying. If that X-ray machine of public vetting is permanently broken, the future of campaigning is going to be incredibly messy.